Happy weekend, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather here to break down a major storm that's going to impact the entire country next week from coast to coast. We are talking about a very wet storm, and unfortunately, for a lot of places, some very heavy rainfall that don't need it, especially out in California as well as the East Coast. So let's get right to it here. I'm going to break things down for you guys. And if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, I have plenty of great videos here, and you'll see kind of the shifts in the forecast over the next couple of days. I'm going to share with you kind of my thoughts as to where I believe everything's going to lay out. Now, a few days ago, it looked like this storm track was going to go much farther south into the eastern United States. That is shifting. And as you can imagine, with still a week to go, there is still going to be some uncertainty and some shifting in the forecast. I know I got a little bit excited here in the Carolinas where I live for maybe some wintry weather, but it looks like now primarily a rainstorm as the mild La Nina pattern and the fire hose from the Pacific take over. And I'm going to talk about why that's changed so that you can understand and follow along with me. So what's going to happen is we're going to see another barrage of storms, the Pineapple Express into California with more flooding expected, especially in central California as we get into the first half of next week. Very heavy snow again across the ski areas and mountains of California, and as well as much of the rest of the interior of the West. And then as we get to the middle of the week, low pressure will emerge and we'll likely have some thunderstorms down south, maybe some severe weather, but at this point, I don't think we're talking about a major severe weather outbreak like we've seen in the last few weeks, fortunately, but that's something I'm going to be pinning down for you guys. And then as we head to the eastern US at the end of next week and into next weekend, the potential setting up for a major coastal low pressure system with some major effects, anywhere from very heavy rain, coastal flooding, strong winds at the coast, to maybe heavy snow across the interior Northeast and Great Lakes. Where that all sets up right now is still going to be fairly uncertain, but I'm going to show you guys some potential solutions and give you my best take on it. All I can really do is my best at this point. Just know that this is more than speculation, but it is still likely to change. So we're in that kind of middle ground where we're still watching trends, looking to see what's going to happen and where. The European model shows storm track heading into California here this weekend, and we're going to see another wave of very heavy rain in northern Cal later today, heavy snow as well, and then that shifts down the coast tomorrow. This system isn't going to be as big as the last one, but another huge system moves in early next week into the Bay Area, and it looks like some very severe amounts of rain over central California by Monday into Tuesday. It'll be raining as well in Southern Cal. So if you're heading to the national championship game, fortunately it's indoors, but likely to be raining in SoCal here Monday night with very heavy snow across the mountains. That storm system takes 2 more days to move through. It'll even be raining all the way down to San Diego by Tuesday evening. And then we'll move inland, and then we see somewhat of a shift northward in the future storm tracks for the second part of the week, but yet more rain coming into California. So I know a lot of people out west are thankful that it's raining because it's been such a dry spell over the last several years. But unfortunately, we're getting too much of a good thing here, and it's leading to some major, major problems with lots of damage, flooding, and very heavy amounts of snow. And then the flooding that's going to happen behind it once we get to the thaw here in the springtime. So that's definitely something I'm concerned about. Here's the totals for rain of the European, and you can see in the next 5 days, rain totals can be as high as a foot of rain around Big Sur and around 3 to 5 inches around the Bay Area. Of course, heavier amounts in the Sierra Nevada. Most of that will be falling as snow. And even in Southern California, when you get down to Malibu and into the hillsides to your north, the potential exists for over 4 inches of rain, maybe as much as 8 inches of rain. San Diego to LA will be looking at 1 to 3 inches of rain, according to the European model. Snow is going to be extreme as well. We're looking at totals over the next 5 days across the Sierra Nevada. Generally speaking, they're going to be in the 5 to 10 foot range with the potential for more than 10 feet over the highest peaks. So we're talking so far this winter, we've already seen about twice as much snow as we would see in an average season. We're going to be doubling that number here by the end of the month of January, if not tripling in some places. Let's take a look now at what's going to happen with this storm and where it's projected to go. So out ahead of it this weekend, chilly air in the Northeast, just some light to moderate snow. We will see some snow falling as we get to tomorrow night and early Monday morning in the mid-Atlantic states, some mixed precipitation. This is not going to be a big deal, but could produce a bit of an issue for Monday morning in parts of Maryland and Northern Virginia. Could have some slick spots, but not really a big storm. The big one is moving into the west here Monday and Tuesday. That's the one I'm going to track across the country for you guys. In fact, I'm going to show you on the tropical tidbits page here, kind of the main storm track and what's changed. This is the European, this is the upper level pattern, and you can see a huge trough digging into the west ridge, building into the central part of the country here, and lower than average heights here in the southeast. So it's going to stay cool in the southeast for this upcoming week. With then some moderation coming Wednesday and Thursday. So the big storm that's heading into California here Tuesday is projected to cut underneath the ridge and move into the southern plains on Thursday morning. But what we see is kind of an increase and a trend in milder air moving into the northeastern United States. A few days ago, we saw a sharper trough here and what we call a 50-50 low east of Newfoundland. If we go back one day even, you guys will be able to see this upper level low here shifting east of Newfoundland. And what that would typically do is allow colder air to spill into the eastern U.S. and a more southern storm track. You can see the European this time yesterday had a very strong trough dipping all the way down to Florida here for next weekend with a 50-50 low at 50 north, 50 west, east of Newfoundland. That allows the ridge to build over the central U.S., but pools cold air down the east coast. Now, the European from midday yesterday got rid of the 50-50 low completely and brought a ridge of high pressure into eastern Canada, just a total 180-degree flip here. And so instead, the trough, rather than cutting off over Florida and producing winter weather in the southeast, was shifting quite a bit, 500 miles to the north over Pennsylvania, the kind of the central Appalachians. And then the run from last night is kind of settled in between the two. But again, it looks like at this point, once the upper low is moving east and off the coastline, the cold air does follow behind the rain, but it doesn't allow for a winter storm in the southeast. Other than elevational snow with cold air pouring in behind it over the weekend, there's no 50-50 low here. And what this means is we definitely have the potential for a big East Coast storm, but it's going to be, with this kind of a ridge in place, it's going to be too mild for any kind of snow across the big cities. So DC, Philly, Boston will continue the snow drought this winter, unfortunately, with a big rainstorm possible. This is a very significant look here on the European. The GFS model, which actually has led the way for these trends, shows a pretty good trough digging down south and east into the Carolinas early next weekend, around this time next weekend, but lifting up into the northeast. And this is a little more favorable if you want to see heavy snow in the interior northeast. Not so much, though, across Long Island, New York, Philly, and Boston. Primarily rain with the storm track this close to the coast. And remember that ocean water temperatures, despite the cold outbreak we had here right around Christmas time, are still above average. So the ocean influences the precipitation type at the coast. And unfortunately, this would spell a big rainstorm for the East Coast. But generally speaking, on the GFS next week, the storm tracks continue to cut up with milder air on the East Coast. That is La Nina special for you guys. Ridge rebuilds here over the Caribbean, and you can see a ridge building all the way into the Pacific. So this is kind of a flip where we see kind of some milder weather, but there are signs that we'll have more cold air coming into the area from central and eastern Canada over the end part of January. So winter definitely not over, but right now it looks like a milder pattern than what you would like to see if you want to see a big snowfall anywhere up the East Coast. So anyway, getting back to the Canadian here, as we head through the week, we see low pressure tracking over the center part of the country. There is a cold air spilling downward, a strong high pressure over central and eastern Canada. But what happens is this low track is so far off to the north that it's pulling milder air from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to Detroit and Chicago on Thursday. So during the height of the storm, we're looking at heavier rain, even in the Great Lakes, before it changed back to some snow. With low pressure forming off the East Coast, we see significant rain just spilling up to the north and east. There's kind of a conveyor belt that pulls all this moisture right back into the northeast. There will be heavy snow with this storm, as there is still some cold air hanging on. But the Canadian, which yesterday at this time showed wintry weather all the way down here in the mid-Atlantic states and Carolinas, now has it shifted 400 miles to the north and west, back across the eastern Great Lakes and up into northern New England. This is next Saturday. And Sunday, this storm could still be spinning around. We could have a significant nor'easter with a fetch of wind off the water up into Maine and Nova Scotia. That can produce some coastal flooding. And then cold air does wrap in behind the storm. So will snow in the mountains here by Saturday night and Sunday, and possibly into Monday if this storm is not exiting the region, which it may not be just yet, depending on how this storm plays out. The European model, and give me a second to load that up for you guys here. And this is the 6Z, so I'm going to go back one run from Weather Bell. Shows kind of a similar pattern here. We've got storm track after storm track pounding the western United States. We do have maybe some light snow falling on the northwest suburbs of Baltimore and Philadelphia Monday morning. Not a big deal at that point, but something we're going to be watching here. But that storm exits and strengthens off of Newfoundland. That's the 50-50 low, but it's not here on Thursday. It's going to be on Tuesday. So California getting pounded, storm system tracking onto the plains Wednesday and Wednesday night. We may see thunderstorms across East Texas and the Arklatex. Again, there could be some stronger storms. Major tornado outbreak, not too likely at this point, nothing like last week, but don't be shocked to see a little bit of severe weather out of this storm as well as it strengthens. But it's cutting up into the Great Lakes once again. So rather than up the East Coast, we have something that's cutting and then firing off a coastal low as that energy transfers to the coastline here on Saturday. This could be significant snow, but it's going to be mainly confined to northern Michigan and across southern Quebec and central Ontario and northern Maine here on Friday night. But again, primarily a big rainstorm. And in fact, the European, since it digs that trough so far back, really it just pulls the low, wraps it right on into the East Coast. And by then the cold air is gone. And we're talking about a major rain event. So even in Pennsylvania and western New York, we could see rain during the height of the storm rather than snow. However, the GFS model disagrees. And I'll be honest with you guys, as much as the GFS has failed us here this winter, it has kind of held on to this idea longer than the other models. It's been kind of more consistent. So maybe we've got to give it a little bit more courtesy with this storm, a little more faith in the GFS model. So again, light snowfall event, Ohio Valley into the mid-Atlantic states Sunday night, should be moving out Monday morning, but something to watch around Philadelphia and Baltimore, especially north and west of 95. That moves out on Tuesday and continues to move away and up into northern Atlantic. Our next storm, after it batters California, spreads onto the plains on Wednesday. The GFS is a little bit farther south than the European and Canadian. It's got a deeper region of high pressure here, and it does have a 50-50 low on Thursday. We really want to see it here on Friday if we want to see winter weather in the Northeast. But this would be, for those of you that are winter weather lovers in the Northeast, this would be a much more desirable storm track than what the Canadian and the European models showed us. So as we get into Thursday, we see thunderstorms, maybe some severe weather down south once again Thursday night and into Friday, but a more favorable storm track here where we've got the primary low cutting up into the Great Lakes, but into colder air, weakening and allowing a coastal low to form here over the weekend. You can see that low forming. But again, it's too far north and east for anything across the southeast winter weather-wise, aside from maybe some mountain snow in the Smokies. This, however, though, because the cold air is entrenched and the 50-50 low hangs on a day longer than the other models show, this would be a much more favorable pattern for some heavy inland snow across the Northeast and the Great Lakes. And of course, the St. Lawrence Valley of Canada as well. It will turn to rain at the coast, so Boston is primarily looking at rain out of this. Unfortunately, again, Boston, if you want snow, of course, not everyone does want it, but if you do want snow, not what you want to see. But this, I'm not going to say bomb cyclone, but it's got a quickly intensifying coastal storm. It's not quite bombing out yet. It's not intensifying that rapidly, but it is intensifying. And this would be definitely the most disruptive of all of the storm tracks that I just showed you. So we're going to keep an eye on that for you guys. I will move along here to kind of what the ensemble shows for the European, and this will give you kind of an average of all the models. And as or all the ensemble members, this is the European giving us several different possible tracks. You can see that the average storm track is over into the Ohio Valley with a second low starting to form here over the Carolinas Friday, but by the time it gets cranking, that low track is too close to the coast for any wintry weather on Friday night next week and then into Saturday. It does look like There are members that take it up into New England, but the average of the models keeps it out to sea. I would not be surprised if this continues to trend a little bit farther west towards New England over the end of next weekend. And we'll take a look at what the European ensemble shows as far as snow. So yeah, light amounts coming here over the next couple of days in this region, generally speaking, an inch or less. As we head to the end of the week, though, rather than the ensemble showing what it showed a few days ago, and that's snow down in here, it now shows the best chance for snow is going to be northern New England and then the central and southern Appalachians on the wraparound part of the storm, with most of that snow falling across the St. Lawrence Valley. So the best chance we're looking at is going to be in here and then across the Great Lakes. The operational GFS, the deterministic, shows this light snowfall coming across the mid-Atlantic states, the Laurel Highlands here Sunday night into Monday morning. And then, of course, that moves out. And then as we head into Friday, with the storm track where it's going to be here around Ohio, the heaviest snow is likely to set up over northern lower Michigan, across Lake Huron and the Georgian Bay, and primarily looking at a Canadian and northern Maine snowfall out of this storm system, with a potential significant snow in the Smokies as well, maybe several inches falling as that cold air blasts in behind the upper level trough here on Saturday night and Sunday morning. So the South will see snow, but it's primarily just going to be in the mountains. The Canadian model, on the other hand, is farther south with the storm track and produces a heavier snow in northern New England as well as central and northern New York. You can see several inches from northern parts of Missouri across the Chicagoland area, maybe an inch or two in Chicago, but then it picks right back up here over lower Lake Huron, just south of the Georgian Bay, and perhaps a significant snowfall across Vermont and northern New Hampshire and into Maine. This, of course, has shifted that heavy snow that I showed you on the European southward by about 150 miles, and that, of course, will mean bigger snow totals here across potentially New England. The GFS model continues to be the farthest south, which is amazing because a few days ago it was farther north than everybody else, but it shows with our storm potentially a significant snowfall over Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan. It shifts everything south about 150 miles from what I showed you here with the Canadian model, and does show a major snowfall over the St. Lawrence Valley and the interior of the Northeast. Perhaps even accumulation all the way to near Philadelphia and certainly Allentown, State College, Coudersport, Pennsylvania, but big snowfall totals over northern New York and up the St. Lawrence Valley, with the potential for this turning into a coastal low that produces near blizzard conditions over the St. Lawrence Valley. This is much more extreme than what any of the other models are showing, so it is not the official forecast. But if this trend continues, then certainly we could be looking at a major snowfall here in northern New England and across southeastern Canada. Let's look ahead real fast here at the weather temperature trends as we go past this storm. You guys have heard me talk about how after the thaw happened at the end of December, it's been mild across much of the country. You'll see that it will be a cooler pattern this upcoming week in the southeast, but it will still be by all intents and purposes, not a cold pattern, with all this mild air continuing to rebuild right behind this storm system here next week on the European weeklies. But we do see some shifts coming. The trough that's been blasting California does shift inland, and that will allow the strong ridge that we've had over the central and eastern U.S. to slowly break down. And we could see a much cooler pattern as we head back into the month of February, generally speaking. There will be a battle zone, though, over the southeast. So this battle zone right here, where you see the cold across the northeast, the warm across the Delmarva and the Outer Banks, could mean that we've got an active storm track right up the East Coast. So don't give up on winter just yet here in the East. We just may have to wait another 3 or 4 weeks before we see anything significant. But again, as we get to 30, 40 days out, the certainty level, of course, continues to drop off. But February overall does look cooler than what we've seen here in January. So it may be one of those situations where we go from one extreme to the other and then back to that extreme once again. We'll have to see if a polar vortex tries to split off and drop into the northeastern United States. I've seen some models showing that, but the certainty level of that isn't very high. So I don't want to give you guys false hope. But if you look at the climate forecast system climate model, you see the warmth across the central and eastern part of the country, and it rebuilds here heading into the 24th of January. But then we start to see a trend towards cooler weather at the very end of the month of January. So that last week, starting the 23rd, we are looking at a cooler look according to the climate forecast system. Could it be rushing the cool? I think it certainly could be, but definitely a flip from what we're seeing now, where the trough that's been blasting the west here shifts inland and eastward. And generally speaking, this is more of a wintry look as we get into the start of February, with much of the country looking significantly colder. The difference, though, with this versus what we saw back before Christmas time, we don't see a large area of 20-degree, 30-degree below average coming in from central Canada. Rather, we see it across the interior of the Northeast and then spreading down into the southeastern United States. So this is a flip. This means, generally speaking, and I'll show you the upper level height anomaly. Generally speaking, we've got a ridge over Florida, but cold air attacking the eastern part of the United States versus the central part of the United States. So if this plays out the way that the climate forecast system shows, we definitely have a more likely, a higher likelihood of seeing storm tracks that produce blizzard conditions for the Northeast rather than the Great Lakes and Midwest. So I'm going to leave it right there because this is way off in the future. It's still a month to maybe 5.5 weeks ahead. But I appreciate y'all's time today. I'll have more videos next week for you discussing the storm. And if we can start narrowing down, timing and amounts of rain and amounts of snow, and maybe a little bit of both or a mix for the eastern and central U.S., I'll start getting those over to you guys on Monday. I appreciate y'all's time. I really do. I'm glad you got to join me. I'll have new content. I'll have some updates over the weekend, but I will be doing some traveling. If you could, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video, and follow along on Facebook as well. I'll give you guys some cool weather photos on there and some updates that'll be more pertinent to the weather. So I appreciate y'all's time. If you have any prayer requests, I'm happy to pray for you guys. I am a Christian, and I believe God has called me to not only be a meteorologist and not only prepare people and bless them with the ability to plan ahead for extreme weather, but also the ability to share what really matters to me. And that's what God has promised through his son, Jesus Christ. I'm going to say to you guys that there is good news by following the path of God. In Psalm 37, 23, 24, a person's steps are made secure by the Lord when they delight in his way. Though they trip up, they won't be thrown down because the Lord holds their hand. God will guide you guys through any trouble you're dealing with. I know it's already been a rough start to the year for many of us. 2022 was a difficult year. Just getting through that year, I think, was a huge win for a lot of us. But just because the calendar turned doesn't mean there won't be more storms thrown at us and more struggle. The good news is that the Lord is there to hold your hand for all of those who believe. I choose to delight in the Lord. I pray that you do as well. If you're struggling with your faith, or if you just choose not to believe, I'm not going to fault you for that. That's up to God, of course. But do know that there is grace given through the acceptance of God through his son and Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm happy to pray for you. Please feel free to request any prayers, even if they're unspoken. And I'm going to ask you, if you could, to pray for me, as I've been given a little bit of difficult news that the Lord knows about. I think everything's going to be great, though, because I know what's coming for me in eternity. But I just appreciate prayers if you could pray for me. And let's pray for the United States and pray for the world, that people will, rather than being divided, will be brought together in times of difficulty and hardship. So really appreciate you guys. I love you all. And I thank you for spending some time with me here this weekend, and expect more weather updates coming next week as we continue this very busy start to the year 2023. And wow, my shirt is, this is crazy. All right, folks, y'all have a wonderful weekend. God bless you and take care.